right now, as you're watching this video. Federal agents building a case that could put one of Memphis's biggest rap stars behind bars for life. We're talking about Mario Mims, better known as Yo Gotti, a player who built a multi-million-dollar empire while allegedly orchestrating some real gangster-type moves that left bodies scattered across Memphis streets. For real, the feds believe they got evidence linking Gotti to multiple murders, including the assassination of his biggest op, Young Dolph. They think homie paid for hits, ordered executions, and turned Memphis into his personal battlefield. But here's the goofy part. Shorty's still walking free, still making music, still running his label like nothing happened. But let me break it down for you. The wall's closing in on that timing, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the federal government believes Yo Gotti is one of the most dangerous CEO in hip-hop. This ain't just about rap beef no more, gang. This about a criminal enterprise disguised as a record label. And these feds ain't playing about getting they, man. Stay locked in till the end, cause we're about to expose everything. The hits, the money, the bodies, and why Gotti might be cooked. Let's get into it. Alright gang, before we get into why the feds want Megamind demons so bad, we got to go back to the beginning and see how Mario Mims became the Yo Gotti we know today. Mario Sanctel Gideon Mims was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1981. Lil Bro grew up in the rigorous apartments. And if you know anything about Memphis, you know that area was on that timing heavy. We talking about the type of environment that either break you or make you harder than concrete. No cap. Memphis in the 80s and 90s wasn't no joke, homie. This was a city where the crack epidemic hit different, where poverty was generational and where young had limited options for making it out. For Mario, music became that escape route, but the streets would always be part of his DNA for real. By the late night South, Gotti was making moves in the local rap scene. His early mixtapes caught attention because they weren't just entertainment. They were street reports. Gang Shorty raped about what he knew, moving weight, dodging police, and surviving in a city that didn't love him back. But here's where things get interesting, fam. While other rappers talked about the streets, Gotti seemed to still be living them, even as his music career took off. Law enforcement noticed he maintained connections to Memphis's underworld. This wasn't just artistic expression, this was real life bleeding into the booth. The feds been watching this yin since day one, and they noticed patterns that made them suspicious. Money coming from sources that didn't match his record sales, associates getting arrested for serious crimes, and a reputation in the streets that went way beyond just being a Now, gang, to understand Gotti's story, you got to understand Memphis hip-hop culture. This city produced legends like 36 Mafia, who put Memphis on the map nationally. They were the first to bring that dark, gritty southern sound to mainstream success. But success in Memphis came with a price. No cap. The city's rap scene was always connected to street politics. Neighborhoods had their own artists, their own crews, and their own beefs. Music wasn't separate from the streets. It was the streets put to beats. When Gotti started claiming he was this wasn't no random shooting. This was a professional hit attempt that happened during one of the biggest black college events in the country. The shooters knew exactly where Dolph would be and when he'd be there. 3 men were arrested. Black Youngster, Frederick Black, and Antavius Gardner. All 3 were charged with discharging a firearm into occupied property and conspiracy. But here's where it gets goofy. Black Youngster's charges were eventually dropped. The official reason? Insufficient evidence. But sources close to the investigation say there was pressure from higher up to let Youngster walk. Someone with serious connections was making calls and that someone had the power to make federal charges disappear. Dolph survived because his SUV was bulletproof. Shorty was moving smart and staying protected. But the message was clear. CMG wasn't playing games. They wanted him gone. And they were willing to do it in broad daylight during a major event. After the shooting, Dolph didn't back down. Instead, he got more aggressive, dropping tracks like 100 Shots and Bulletproof that directly called out his enemies. He wasn't scared. He was motivated. But the feds were taking notes on everything. They saw how quickly the charges got dropped. They noticed the connections between the shooters and CMG, and they started building a file that would eventually become a federal RICO investigation. What really caught their attention was the coordination of the attack. This wasn't some street-level beef that got out of hand. This was planned, financed, and executed like a military operation. And that type of organization requires leadership, funding, and a criminal enterprise. The feds started asking who planned this hit, who paid for it, who had the power to make the charges disappear. And every answer pointed back to CMG and Yoti. Just months later, on September 26, 2017, they tried again, this time in Hollywood. Outside the Lowe's Hotel, Dolph was leaving the hotel when 3 men approached him in the valet area, and things got real ugly real fast. According to police reports, a fight broke out. Dolph was knocked to the ground and then someone pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. Shorty was rushed into emergency surgery but survived again. Here's where it gets real interesting. Gang, the LAPD named Yo Gotti as a person of interest. Witnesses placed both Gotti and Dolph at the same hotel. Members of their crews had gotten into an argument that escalated into violence. This wasn't no coincidence. Both camps were staying at the same high-end hotel in Hollywood. The feds believe this was another planned hit that went wrong when Dolph fought back and survived. Corey McClendon, one of Gotti's close associates, was arrested near the scene. Police found a gold Escalade linked to the suspects not far away, but just like in Charlotte, the charges didn't stick. McClendon was released and no one was ever officially charged. 2 attempts on Dolph's life. 2 times the shooters walked free. The feds started asking the real questions. How does someone survive to professional hits? And who has the power to make charges disappear in multiple states? The pattern was becoming clear to federal investigators. This wasn't random violence. This was an organized campaign to eliminate Young. Dolph and the organization behind it had serious connections and serious money. What made it even more suspicious was Gotti's reaction after each incident. Instead of distancing himself from the violence, he seemed to embrace it. His social media posts, his lyrics, and his public statements all suggested he wasn't upset about the attempts on Dolph's life. The feds started building a psychological profile of Gotti as someone who used violence as a business tool. They believed he saw Dolph not just as competition, but as a threat to his entire operation that needed to be eliminated. And they were right, because the third attempt wouldn't fail. To understand how deep this goes, we got to talk about Anthony Mims, better known as Big Juke, Yo Gotti's older brother. While Gotti was the public face of CMG, Juke was allegedly the muscle behind the operation. According to federal sources, Big Juke wasn't just Gotti's brother. He was his enforcer. When problems needed to be handled, when people needed to be dealt with, Juke was the one who made the calls and handled that type underscore during the young Dolph murder trial. Prosecutors revealed that Big Juke had allegedly put up $100,000 for the hit on Dolph. Let that sink in. Gang, $100,000 for a murder contract. This wasn't some street-level beef anymore. This was organized crime with a corporate structure. The feds believe CMG operated like a criminal organization. No cap. At the top, you had Gotti making the business decisions. Below him, Big Juke handled the street operations, and below them, a network of artists, associates, and street soldiers carried out orders. This wasn't just a record label. It was allegedly a criminal enterprise. Using music as a front, artists weren't just signed for their talent. They were recruited for their street connections and willingness to handle business when business needed to be handled. The feds started mapping out connections between CMG artists and various crimes across Memphis. They found patterns that made them suspicious. Whenever someone crossed CMG, bad things happened to them or people close to them. What made Big Juke particularly dangerous was his reputation in the streets. Unlike Gotti, who had become more of a businessman, Juke never left the streets behind. He maintained connections to gangs, drug dealers, and killers throughout Memphis. The feds believed Juke was the bridge between CMG's legitimate business operations and its alleged criminal activities. He could authorize hits, arrange for weapons, and coordinate with street crews, all while maintaining plausible deniability for his brother. But that protection wouldn't last forever. Because when you live by violence, you eventually die by violence. And Big Juke's time was coming. On November 17, 2021, young Dolph walked into Makita's Homemade Cookies in South Memphis. It was a spot he frequented, a place where he felt safe in his own city. He had no idea he was walking into a trap that had been months in the making. At 12:30 p.m., 2 masked gunmen approached Dolph's vehicle and opened fire. They shot him 22 times in his chest, neck, chin, both arms, and multiple times in his back. This wasn't just a murder gang. This was an execution designed to send a message. The killers fled in a white Mercedes coupe that had been stolen weeks earlier, but they made mistakes that would eventually lead to their arrest. Security cameras caught everything. Cell phone data placed them at the scene. And most importantly, they left witnesses alive. What made this murder different from the previous attempts was the level of planning involved. The killers knew Dolph's routine. They knew he frequented that cookie shop. They had stolen a getaway car weeks in advance. This was a professional hit carried out by people with inside information. The feds believed the murder was planned for months, with multiple people involved in surveillance, planning, and execution. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a business decision carried out like a military operation. On January 11, 2022, U.S. Marshals arrested 23-year-old Justin Johnson, known as the rapper Straight Drop. 5 days later, they got Cornelius Smith. Both were charged with first-degree murder. But the biggest arrest came later. Hernandez Goen, 43 years old. Prosecutors believe Goen was the mastermind who coordinated the hit. And here's where it gets real interesting. Goen had direct connections to Big Juke and CMG during the trial. It was revealed that CMG had paid $50,000 for the killer's legal representation. Think about that for a second, fam. Legal representation. Think about that for a second, fam. Why would a record label pay for the defense of accused murderers unless they had something to hide? That $50,000 payment became the smoking gun that connected CMG directly to young Dolph's murder. It showed consciousness of guilt and financial involvement in a criminal conspiracy. After Dolph's murder, Memphis became a war zone. No cap. His crew, Paper Route Empire, wasn't about to let his death go unanswered. They started hunting everyone connected to the hit, and the body count started rising immediately. First was comedian Darian Damoni Childs, who made the mistake of joking about Dolph's death online. A week later, Shorty was gunned down. The message was clear: disrespect Dolph's memory and you'll join him. Then came Big Noi, a rapper connected to Straight Drop. He was shot dead at the New Horizon River apartments. The streets were talking and everyone knew this was retaliation for Dolph's murder. But the biggest target was always going to be Big Juke. Paper Route Empire knew he was allegedly behind the hit, and they were patient, waiting for the right moment to catch him slipping. But feds were watching all of this unfold, taking notes on every murder, every retaliation, every move both sides made. They saw how the violence escalated and spread throughout Memphis, affecting people who weren't even directly involved in the original beef. Memphis's murder rate spiked after Dolph's death. Young people were choosing sides and settling disputes with guns instead of words. The beef between CMG and Paper Route Empire had inspired copycat violence throughout the city. What made the retaliation particularly dangerous was how organized it was. This wasn't random street violence. This was coordinated revenge carried out by people with resources and connections. Paper Route Empire had their own network of street soldiers, gang connections, and financial resources. They could plan hits, acquire weapons, and coordinate attacks just like CMG allegedly did. The feds realized they weren't just dealing with a rap beef anymore. They were dealing with two criminal organizations at war with each other, using Memphis as their battlefield. A federal task force was formed to investigate the escalation. They started treating both organizations as potential RICO enterprises and began building cases against leadership on both sides. But the biggest retaliation was still coming, and when it happened, it would change everything. On January 13, 2024, the retaliation reached its peak. Big Juke was attending a funeral for his uncle Eric Bone, a legendary Memphis kingpin. After the service, there was a repast at Piran's restaurant and event center. Growing up, Gotti and Juck had looked up to their uncle Eric as a father figure. He was a legendary Memphis kingpin known for being a cutthroat boss and stacking serious paper. He was basically the big niche of Memphis back in the day. Eric's passing brought much sadness to Gotti and Juke, and the funeral was huge with hundreds of people flying into town, including both brothers rolling deep with security. Strangely, on the morning of the funeral, Big Juke made an Instagram post that said, "Stay alert to stay alive, watch your back at all times." Looking back, that post seems prophetic as hell. At 4:15 p.m., as Big Juke sat in his Escalade with his mother in the back seat, a white Ford Explorer pulled up alongside them. The shooters rolled down their windows and opened fire without hesitation. Big Juck's mother managed to escape the vehicle and run for her life. But Juck wasn't so lucky. The man who allegedly orchestrated young Dolph's murder was now dead himself, killed in the same brutal fashion. This was the ultimate nail in the coffin for Yo Gotti and CMG after numerous losses following Dolph's passing. This was the biggest one of them all. Not only was Juck his big brother, but he was also Gotti's idol and protector. Jug had taught Gotti how to hustle, protected him growing up, and according to police, handled his problems when they needed handling. His death left Gotti vulnerable and exposed in ways he'd never been before. The streets of Memphis erupted after Juck's murder. Some people celebrated, seeing it as justice for young Dolph. Others mourned, recognizing that the cycle of violence was destroying the city's hip-hop scene. But for the feds, Juck's murder was just more evidence of the criminal conspiracy they were building their case around. The violence, the retaliation, the organized nature of the hits, it all supported their theory that CMG was a criminal enterprise. Here's why the feds are so interested in Yoti Gang. They believe CMG operates as a criminal organization under the RICO Act. RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, was designed to take down organized crime families like the Mafia. Under RICO, if you can prove that an organization engaged in a pattern of criminal activity, you can charge everyone in the organization, even if they didn't personally commit the crimes. The feds believe they can prove CMG is exactly that kind of organization. They're looking at multiple murders, drug trafficking, money laundering, and witness intimidation that believe Gotti used his record label as a front for criminal activities. Just like mob bosses use legitimate businesses to hide their operations, the feds have been building their case for years. No cap, they have financial records showing suspicious money transfers. They have wiretaps of conversations between CMG associates. They have testimony from cooperating witnesses who are ready to flip. Most importantly, they have that $50,000 payment for the killer's lawyers. That payment creates a direct financial link between CMG and young Dolph's murderers. In federal court, that's called consciousness of guilt. They also have patterns of behavior that support their case. Every time someone crossed CMG, violence followed. The feds don't believe in coincidences. They believe in criminal conspiracies. The federal investigation has been going on for years with agents interviewing witnesses, analyzing financial records, and building connections between CMG and various crimes throughout Memphis. Sources say they have several cooperating witnesses ready to testify against Gotti. These witnesses can provide inside information about how CMG operated, who gave orders, and how decisions were made. The challenge for prosecutors is making sure these witnesses are credible. Defense attorneys will attack their motives, their criminal histories, and their deals with the government. But if their testimony is corroborated by physical evidence, it could be devastating for Gotti. Federal prosecutors have a 95% conviction rate, and they don't bring RICO cases unless they're confident they can win. The fact that they're still building this case suggests they believe they have strong evidence against Gotti and CMG. Young Dolph wasn't Gotti's only enemy. His beef with 36 Mafia goes back to the early 2000s when both were claiming to be the king of Memphis, and that beef allegedly turned deadly, too. At Crunkfest 2004, Gotti and 40 of his crew stormed the stage wearing triple Mafia t-shirts, a direct disrespect to 36 Mafia. The concert ended in violence with fights breaking out and shots fired in the parking lot. But the real violence came later. Several people connected to 36 Mafia ended up dead or missing over the years. The feds are looking into whether CMG was involved in those deaths too. The feds believe CMG had connections to various Memphis gangs, including the Trulla Mafia. These weren't just business relationships, they were criminal partnerships that benefited both sides. When CMG needed muscle, they allegedly called on gang members. When gangs needed money or protection, they allegedly worked with CMG. It was a symbiotic relationship that kept both sides in power. The problem is, when you're in business with killers, people end up dead. And the feds believe CMG was responsible for ordering hits on multiple people over the years, not just young Dolph. They're looking at unsolved murders, missing persons cases, and suspicious deaths that might be connected to CMG's alleged criminal activities. The young Dolph case might just be the tip of the iceberg. What makes these cases particularly difficult to solve is the code of silence in the streets. People are afraid to talk because they know what happens to snitches. But federal pressure and RICO charges can make people reconsider their loyalty. The feds are offering deals to people who are willing to cooperate and provide information about CMG's alleged criminal activities. Some people are starting to talk, and what they're saying is building a strong case against Gotti. A multi-agency task force has been formed to investigate CMG and its alleged connections to organized crime. They're treating this as a major RICO case that could result in life sentences for everyone involved. Through all of this, Gotti has maintained his innocence, gang. He's never been officially charged with any of these crimes. His lawyers argue that he's being targeted because of his success in his past, not because of actual evidence. But the feds aren't buying it. No cap. They believe Gotti is a master manipulator who's managed to stay one step ahead of the law while ordering hits on his enemies and running a criminal organization. Right now, federal agents are still building their case. They're interviewing witnesses, analyzing financial records, and trying to flip CMG associates into cooperating witnesses. Sources close to the investigation say they're close to filing charges. They believe they have enough evidence to prove that CMG operated as a criminal organization and that Gotti was the head of that organization. After Justin Johnson was convicted of young Dolph's murder, sources say Yo Gotti quickly left the country. He's been spotted in various international locations, leading some to speculate that he's trying to avoid arrest. The feds are monitoring his movements closely. If they believe he's a flight risk, they could move to arrest him immediately rather than waiting to build a perfect case. International travel also complicates the legal situation. If Gotti is arrested overseas, extradition proceedings could take months or years. That gives his legal team time to prepare, but also makes him look guilty of running from justice. Under RICO statutes, the government can also seize assets that were purchased with proceeds from criminal activity. That means Gotti's cars, jewelry, real estate, and even his stake in CMG could be at risk. The feds have already started mapping out his assets, determining what can be traced to legitimate business income versus what might have come from criminal activities. Asset forfeit can be a powerful tool for pressuring defendants to cooperate. The question isn't if charges will be filed. Sources say it's when they are. Gotti could be looking at life in prison under RICO statutes. Gotti's legal team is preparing for the fight of their lives. They know federal prosecutors have a 95% conviction rate, so they need a perfect defense strategy to beat these charges. The defense will likely argue that Gotti is being targeted because of his lyrics and his past, not because of actual evidence of criminal activity. They'll claim the government is used singled by association to build a case they can't prove with direct evidence. They'll also call character witnesses to testify about his positive contributions to the community. They'll highlight his charitable work, his mentorship of young artists, and his legitimate business success. The goal is to present Gotti as a successful businessman who escaped the streets through music, not someone who used music to facilitate criminal activity. The defense will also challenge every piece of evidence the government presents. They'll question the reliability of cooperating witnesses, the interpretation of financial records, and the relevance of rap lyrics as evidence. They'll argue that correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because violence occurred around CMG doesn't mean CMG ordered it. They'll claim the government is using guilt by association to build a case they can't prove with direct. But federal prosecutors have advantages that state prosecutors don't. They have unlimited resources. They can offer better deals to cooperating witnesses, and they can use RICO statutes to cast a wide net. They also have years of evidence, financial records, wiretaps, surveillance footage, and testimony from multiple witnesses. They believe they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that CMG was a criminal organization. Most importantly, they have that $50,000 payment for the killer's lawyers. That single transaction could be the smoking gun that proves CMG's involvement in young Dolph's murder and establishes the criminal conspiracy. While we've been talking about legal strategies and criminal organizations, it's important to remember the human cost of this violence gang. Young Dolph left behind a partner and children who will never see their father again. Mia J. Dolph's longtime partner and mother of his children has become an advocate for gun violence prevention. She's turned her pain into purpose, but nothing can bring back the man she loved. Big Duke's family is also grieving. Despite his alleged criminal activities, he was still a father, a brother, and a son. His death left another family shattered by violence. This violence hasn't just affected the families directly involved, it's traumatized an entire community. Memphis has one of the highest murder rates in the country, and high-profile killings like these only make the problem worse. The beef between CMG and Paper Route Empire has inspired copycat violence throughout the city. Young people are choosing sides and settling disputes with guns instead of words. Community leaders are working to prevent future violence by providing alternatives to street life and mediating conflicts before they escalate. They are trying to show young people that there are other ways to gain respect and success. But change has to come from within the hip-hop community itself. Artists, labels, and fans all have a responsibility to reject violence and support positive messages. The culture can evolve, but only if people choose to change it. The next generation of Memphis artists is watching this case and learning from it. Some are choosing to stay independent and avoid street politics. Others are focusing on positive messages and community building rather than perpetuating cycles of violence. They're trying to show that you can be successful in hip-hop without being connected to criminal activity. The question is whether Memphis can break the cycle of violence that has plagued its hip-hop scene for decades. Can artists compete through music instead of murder? Can success be measured in streams instead of Let's look at the timeline of violence surrounding this beef because the pattern is undeniable. Gang 2017. First attempt on young Dolph's life in Charlotte. Over 100 shots fired. 2017. Second attempt in Hollywood. Dolph shot multiple times but survives. 20-1. Young Dolph murdered in Memphis. Shot 22 times at cookie shop. 2022. Retaliation killings begin. Multiple people connected to the hit are murdered. 2023. More CMG associates killed. The violence spreads throughout Memphis. 2024. Big Duke murdered. The alleged mastermind behind Dolph's hit is eliminated. That's 7 years of escalating violence with bodies dropping on both sides. The feds believe this pattern proves that CMG was operating as a criminal organization using violence to eliminate competition and maintain control. Each incident was more brazen than the last. The Charlotte shooting happened in broad daylight during a major event. The Hollywood shooting was at a high-end hotel with security cameras everywhere. Dolph's murder was in his own neighborhood at a place he frequented. The killers weren't trying to hide. They were sending messages. They wanted people to know that crossing CMG had deadly consequences. That's not just criminal behavior. That's terrorism designed to control through fear. The feds see this pattern as evidence of a criminal conspiracy that went far beyond normal rat beef. This was organized crime using violence as a business tool to eliminate competition and maintain market control. What makes this case particularly strong is how well documented everything is. Security cameras, social media posts, financial records, and witness testimony all support the government's theory of criminal conspiracy. The violence also escalated in response to business competition. When Dolph's independence threatened CMG's dominance in Memphis, the violence increased. When retaliation threatened CMG's leadership, more violence followed. This pattern suggests that violence was being used as a business strategy, not just personal revenge. That's exactly the kind of criminal enterprise that RICO statutes were designed to prosecute. The Fed's strongest weapon in RICO cases is cooperating witnesses, people who were part of the organization but decided to testify against their former associates. And sources say they have several witnesses ready to testify against Gotti. These witnesses can provide inside information about how CMG operated, who gave orders, and how decisions were made. They can connect the dots between the business side and the criminal side of the organization. The challenge for prosecutors is making sure these witnesses are credible. Defense attorneys will attack their motives, their criminal histories, and their deals with the government. But if their testimony is corroborated by physical evidence, it could be devastating. Follow the money. That's the golden rule of federal investigations. Gang, the feds have been tracking CMG's finances for years, looking for suspicious transactions and unexplained income. They're particularly interested in cash transactions, payments to associates who weren't officially employed by the label, and money that flowed to people later charged with crimes. The $50,000 payment for legal fees is just the tip of the iceberg. Money laundering charges are often easier to prove than murder charges. If the feds can show that CMG used legitimate business accounts to pay for criminal activities, they can build a strong RICO case even without proving specific murders. The feds are also looking at CMG's business structure to see if it was designed to facilitate criminal activity. Record labels can be perfect fronts for criminal organizations because they deal in cash, have complex financial structures, and employ people with criminal backgrounds. What makes CMG particularly suspicious is how many of its associates have been arrested for serious crimes. When a significant percentage of your employees are criminals, that suggests the organization might be criminal itself. The feds are building a comprehensive picture of CMG as a criminal organization that used music as a front for illegal activities. If they can prove this in court, everyone associated with the organization could face serious charges. One of the biggest questions in this case is where artistic expression ends and criminal confession begins. Fam hip-hop has always been about telling stories from the streets. But when do those stories become evidence? Gotti's lyrics often reference violence, drug dealing, and street life. Prosecutors argue these aren't fictional stories. They're confessions set to music. Defense attorneys argue they're protected speech and artistic expression. This debate goes to the heart of hip-hop culture. If rappers can't talk about street life without being prosecuted, does that violate their First Amendment rights? Or should there be consequences when art allegedly reflects real criminal activity? The music industry is watching this case closely because it could set precedents for how law enforcement investigates record labels. If CMG is proven to be a criminal organization, other labels might face similar scrutiny. But critics argue that some labels have crossed the line from artistic expression to criminal activity. They point to cases like this as evidence that the industry needs better oversight and accountability. The challenge is distinguishing between legitimate artistic expression and actual criminal activity. Not every rapper who talks about violence is actually violent, but some clearly are. What makes the CMG case different is the alleged direct connection between the lyrics and actual crimes. When your music talks about eliminating enemies and your enemies actually get eliminated, that's more than just artistic expression. The feds are using Gotti's own words against him, arguing that his lyrics provide insight into his criminal mindset and activities. They're treating his music as a confession rather than entertainment. This approach is controversial because it could criminalize an entire genre of music. But prosecutors argue they're not targeting the music. They're targeting the criminal activity that the music allegedly describes. The outcome of this case could determine how hip-hop artists express themselves in the future. If lyrics can be used as evidence of criminal activity, artists might have to choose between authenticity and legal safety. After Justin Johnson was convicted of Young Dolph's murder, sources say Yo Gotti quickly left the country. He's been spotted in various international locations, leading some to speculate that he's trying to avoid arrest. The feds are monitoring his movements closely. If they believe he's a flight risk, they could move to arrest him immediately rather than waiting to build a perfect case. International travel also complicates the legal situation. If Gotti is arrested overseas, extradition proceedings could take months or years. That gives his legal team time to prepare, but also makes him look guilty of running from justice. Under RICO statutes, the government can seize assets that were purchased with proceeds from criminal activity. That means Gotti's cars, jewelry, real estate, and even his stake in CMG could be at risk. The feds have already started mapping out his assets, determining what can be traced to legitimate business income versus what might have come from criminal activities. Asset forfeit can be a powerful tool for pressuring defendants to cooperate. When you're facing the loss of everything you've worked for, cooperation starts looking more attractive. The international aspect also raises questions about CMG's global operations. If the organization was involved in criminal activity domestically, were they also involved internationally? The feds are working with international law enforcement agencies to track CMG's activities and assets worldwide. That this could become a global investigation with implications far beyond Memphis. What makes this particularly serious is that fleeing the country, while under federal investigation, can be seen as consciousness of guilt. It suggests that Gotti knows charges are coming and is trying to avoid them. If the feds decide to move quickly to prevent Gotti from avoiding justice, they could file charges and request his immediate arrest wherever he is in the world. When this case goes to trial, prosecutors will focus on the pattern of violence surrounding CMG gang. They'll argue that this wasn't random street beef. It was an organized campaign of intimidation and murder. They'll show the jury how every time someone crossed CMG, violence followed. They'll connect the financial evidence to the criminal activity, and they'll argue that Gotti was the head of this criminal organization. The prosecution's strongest argument will be that $50,000 payment for legal fees. They'll argue that innocent record labels don't pay for accused murderers' lawyers unless they're trying to protect themselves. They'll also present testimony from cooperating witnesses who can provide inside information about how CMG operated. These witnesses will describe meetings, conversations, and decisions that show the criminal nature of the organization. Financial records will show suspicious money transfers, unexplained income, and payments to people later charged with crimes. This evidence will support the theory that CMG was laundering money and financing criminal activities. Surveillance footage, phone records, and social media posts will corroborate the witness testimony and show the connections between CMG and various crimes. The prosecution will argue that the evidence shows a clear pattern of criminal activity, directed by Gotti and carried out by his associates. They'll claim this meets the definition of a criminal organization under RICO statutes. If convicted under RICO statutes, Gotti could face life in prison. The federal government doesn't mess around with organized crime cases. They go for maximum sentences to send a message, even if he's not convicted of ordering specific murders. The conspiracy and racketeering charges alone could put him away for decades. At 43 years old, that would essentially be a life sentence. The stakes couldn't be higher for Gotti. This isn't just about his freedom, it's about his legacy, his family, and of everything he's built over his career. Gotti's defense team will challenge every piece of evidence the government presents. They'll question the reliability of cooperating witnesses, the interpretation of financial records, and the relevance of rap lyrics. They'll argue that correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because violence occurred around CMG doesn't mean CMG ordered it. They'll claim the government is using guilt by association to build a case they can't prove with direct evidence. The defense will also call character witnesses to testify about Gotti's positive contributions to the community. They'll highlight his charitable work, his mentorship of young artists, and his legitimate business success. They'll present Gotti as a successful businessman who escaped the streets through music, not someone who used music to facilitate criminal acts. They'll argue that he's being unfairly targeted because of his past and his artistic expression. The defense will challenge the credibility of cooperating witnesses by highlighting their criminal histories, their motives for cooperating, and the deals they received from the government. They'll argue that these witnesses are lying to reduce their own sentences, and that their testimony can't be trusted. They'll claim the government is building its case on the word of criminals who have every reason to lie. The defense will also argue that rap lyrics are protected speech under the First Amendment and can't be used as evidence of criminal activity. They'll claim the government is criminalizing artistic expression. They'll present expert testimony about hip-hop culture and the use of fictional narratives in rap music. They'll argue that Gotti's lyrics are entertainment, not confessions. The defense will challenge the government's interpretation of financial records, arguing that the transactions have legitimate business explanations and don't prove criminal activity. They'll claim that the $50,000 payment for legal fees was a legitimate business expense to protect the company's reputation, not evidence of criminal conspiracy. A conviction would send shockwaves through the hip-hop industry gang. It would prove that the federal government can successfully prosecute record labels as criminal organizations under RICO statutes. Other labels would likely increase their legal compliance efforts and distance themselves from artists with serious criminal histories. The days of openly celebrating street credibility might be over. For Memphis, a conviction might bring some closure to the families affected by this violence, but it won't bring back the people who died or undo the trauma this beef caused to the community. An acquittal would be seen as a victory for artistic expression and a defeat for federal overreach. Gotti would likely return to music with renewed credibility and a powerful story of surviving government persecution. But an acquit wouldn't necessarily mean Gotti is innocent. It would just mean the government couldn't prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. The court of public opinion might reach a different verdict than the legal system. Regardless of the legal outcome, this case has already changed how people view CMG and Gotti. The allegations alone have damaged his reputation and raised questions about his business practices. The case has also highlighted the connection between hip-hop culture and criminal activity, sparking debates about authenticity, artistic expression, and social responsibility. For the families of the victims, no legal outcome can bring back their loved ones or undo the pain they've experienced. Justice in the courtroom doesn't equal healing in the heart. The case has also shown how rap beefs can escalate into real violence with deadly consequences. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing entertainment with street politics. Whatever the outcome, this case will be studied for years as an example of how the federal government investigates and prosecutes alleged criminal organizations in the music industry. Regardless of what happens to Gotti, Memphis hip-hop will continue, fam. The next generation of artists is watching this case and learning from it. Some are choosing to stay completely independent and avoid street politics. Others are focusing on positive messages and community building rather than perpetuating cycles of violence. They're trying to show that you can be successful in hip-hop without being connected to criminal activity. The question is whether Memphis can break the cycle of violence that has plagued its hip-hop scene for decades. Can artists compete through music instead of murder? Can success be measured in streams instead of body? Community leaders are working to prevent future violence by providing alternatives to street life and mediating conflicts before they escalate. They're trying to show young people that there are other ways to gain respect and success, but change has to come from within the hip-hop community itself. Artists, labels, and fans all have a responsibility to reject violence and support positive. The culture can evolve, but only if people choose to change it. The next generation has the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the past and build something better. Some young Memphis artists are already making that choice. They're staying independent, avoiding street politics, and focusing on their music rather than their street credibility. They're proving that you can be authentic without being criminal, that you can represent the streets without perpetuating street violence. The challenge is changing the culture's definition of authenticity. For too long, street credibility has been measured by criminal activity rather than artistic talent. If Memphis hip-hop can evolve beyond its violent past, it could become a model for other cities dealing with similar issues. The city has the talent and the history to lead positive change in hip-hop culture. But that change requires conscious effort from everyone involved: artists, labels, fans, and the community. It's not enough to just avoid violence. There has to be active promotion of positive alternatives. The beef between CMG and Paper Route Empire has cost too many lives and destroyed too many families. Gang Young Dolph, Big Juke, and multiple other people are dead. Their children will grow up without fathers. Their families will never be whole again. This whole situation shows what happens when ego and pride become more important than human life. When keeping it real becomes more important than keeping people alive. The violence didn't solve anything. It didn't determine who was the real king of Memphis. It didn't settle the business disputes. It just created more pain, more trauma, and more problems. All of this destruction happened because grown men couldn't handle business disputes like businessmen. Instead of competing through music, they competed through murder. The irony is that both sides could have been successful without the violence. Memphis is big enough for multiple successful artists and labels. There was no need for this level of conflict. Instead of building the Memphis hip-hop scene together, they tore it apart with violence. Instead of creating opportunities for the next generation, they created trauma and fear. The young people watching this learned the wrong lessons. They learned that violence is how you handle disrespect. They learned that murder is how you solve problems. But it doesn't have to be this way. Hip-hop culture can evolve beyond violence. Artists can compete through talent instead of terror. The question is whether the culture will learn from these tragedies or repeat them. Will the next generation choose music over murder? Will they choose building over destroying? The power to change is in the hands of the artists, the fans, and the community. They can choose to reject violence and embrace positive competition. But change requires more than just good intentions. It requires active effort to create alternatives to street life and to support artists who choose positive messages over violent ones. So why do the feds still want Yo Gotti gang? Because they believe he's the head of a criminal organization that used violence to eliminate competition and maintain control over Memphis's hip-hop scene. They have financial records, witness testimony, and a pattern of violence that they believe proves CMG operated as more than just a record label. They think they can prove that Gotti ordered hits on his enemies and used his business as a front for criminal activity. Whether they can prove it in court remains to be seen. Federal prosecutors have a high conviction rate, but RICO cases are complex and defense attorneys are skilled at creating reasonable doubt. What's not in doubt is the human cost of this beef. Multiple people are dead, families are destroyed, and a community is traumatized. All because of ego, pride, and the refusal to let music speak louder than violence. This case is about more than just Yo Gotti or Young Dolph. It's about the relationship between hip-hop culture and criminal activity. It's about whether artistic expression can be used as evidence of real crimes. It's about the responsibility that comes with influence and success. When you have a platform, you have a choice. Use it to build or use it to destroy. Hip-hop has always been about telling stories from the streets, but when those stories become reality, people get hurt. The challenge for the culture is maintaining authenticity while rejecting violence. The federal government is sending a message with this investigation. If you use your platform to facilitate criminal activity, you will be held accountable. The days of hiding behind artistic expression while ordering hits might be over. As I'm recording this, Yo Gotti remains a free man. He's still making music, still running CMG, still claiming his innocence. But federal agents are still building their case, still interviewing witnesses, still following the money. The question isn't whether charges will be filed. Sources say they're coming soon. The question is whether the federal government can prove that one of hip-hop's biggest stars is actually one of its most dangerous criminals. For now, Gotti continues to perform and record as if nothing has changed. But those close to the situation say he knows the walls are closing in. He knows that his past is catching up with him. This story isn't over, fam. In fact, it might just be beginning. Because if the feds are right about Yo Gotti, then everything we thought we knew about CMG was a lie. And if they're wrong, then they're about to destroy an innocent man's life and career. Either way, the truth will come out in court, and when it does, it will change hip-hop forever. The question is, are you ready for that truth? Are you ready to see one of hip-hop's biggest stars potentially go down as one of its biggest criminals? Because that's what this case is really about. The truth behind the music, the reality behind the image, and the price of keeping it too real. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're going to be following this case every step of the way. When those charges drop, when that trial starts, when that verdict comes in, we're going to be here to break it all down for you. This is your boy signing off, but this story is far from over. The feds still want Yoti, and they ain't giving up until they get him. The only question is, will they succeed? Stay tuned, gang. This is Abuto. Get real interesting.